Here's another aspect of framing. Imagine yourself now in a situation where your current job means you have very little social contact, you're isolated for long stretches, but it's very close to home. It only takes you 10 minutes to get there. Unfortunately, your contract actually comes to an end very soon, and there's a couple of other jobs that are available that you're pretty sure you would actually get. Job X has limited contact with others, more than your current job. It's a bit further away, 20 minutes away. Job Y is even more sociable, but it's even further away. So presented with a choice between X and Y, people who are presented with this decision, the majority tend to choose X. So they go for job X with a limited contact and a little bit further away from home than the current job. You're probably starting to spot a trend in what's happening here. If you present another very similar group of people with a similar problem, but the reference point, the present job, is one that's at the other end of the spectrum. So it's one where there is already a high level of social contact, but it's a very long way from home. It takes 80 minutes to get there. So again, they have to give up the current job and to choose between X and Y in terms of what jobs they would prefer to move to. And in this case, the majority of them choose Y. So what we're actually seeing here is a decision where in the first case we start at the bottom of the choices, so one where there's little social contact but you're actually very close to home, so it's bad in one respect but good in another, and you choose to move to X, which is the closest in terms of type of job. In the second situation, you're in a position where you have a very long time to travel to work but a very high level of social contact, and people tend to choose Y, which is closer to where they actually started from. So the starting point, the reference point, is very much influencing what people's decisions are. Rather than setting aside the current position, looking at the two options in the middle, X and Y, and really evaluating the pros and cons of those, they're actually looking at where they started from and the similarity to that. So again, how you actually present decisions to people can actually very much influence the choices that they might make. And there's a couple more of these examples. Now imagine you're about to purchase a new laptop computer. It's going to cost you £750, and just as you're about to pay for it, well, maybe you've not quite got to the till, your friend texts you to say that they've just seen the same laptop and offer at a lower price in another shop that's just 10 minutes walk away. How much cheaper would it have to be to persuade you to actually go to the other store? And this is another of these examples that's been used with many groups of decision makers. I've used it with many groups of my students face to face, and they typically give a response of an average of around £50. Some people might give lower, some people might give higher, but if it was £50 or more than £50, less than 750, they think it's worth the 10-minute walk. Now, just like the example that we saw previously, present a similar decision to the other half of the class, different but similar group of people, and the decision that they're faced with is they're about to buy a slightly less sophisticated bit of technology, but a sophisticated new calculator that costs £50. As before, the friend texts and says that they've just seen it on offer at a lower price somewhere else, 10 minutes walk away. How much cheaper would it have to be to persuade them to go to the other store? And the typical answer that you get for this is somewhere around about £20 or so. Again, there's a range, and some people wouldn't pay anything to go to the other store. So two very different contexts, but if you turn what those answers actually say into a different dimension, the first people essentially are saying that 10 minutes of their time is worth about £50. So they'd walk 10 minutes to get £50 off their laptop. So an hour of their time is worth £300. The second lot are actually saying they'd walk 10 minutes to save £20. So an hour of their time is worth £120. So you're getting very different response to the question in the different situations. So you might actually want to know how people value their time, and you're trying to get at it by a roundabout way. But what this shows is you get very different answers depending on how you actually frame that. So should there be a common answer to that? Should it be that people value their time differently, put a different value against it depending on the context? What they tend to be doing is looking at things proportionately in terms of the percentage of saving, rather than looking at in terms of absolute saving. But you see this in many, many different contexts. So if someone is actually buying a new home, they're much more likely to, at the same time, buy new furniture, have a new bathroom installed, or something like that. Whereas if they've been in their house for a number of years, it's a much more difficult decision. They're much more reluctant to spend a significant amount of money on decoration or new rooms or whatever. So where the actual expenditure is just a small proportion in relation to the base expenditure, it's much more likely to be incurred. So beware those marketing people, and I'm sure there's some that are sitting next to you in your class that are trying to convince you to make purchases by these kinds of different ways of presenting things. So one more decision to look at that actually brings in the whole notion of risk and attitude to risk, and how our view of that is changed by how problems are presented to us. So in this decision here, imagine that you work for a large computer manufacturer and they've recently been hit with economic difficulties, and it looks as if 3 of the plants that they operate are going to have to be closed, and that will mean that 6,000 employees are laid off. The production director, who you're working quite closely with, has been exploring different ways of avoiding this crisis, and she's developed 2 plans that would enable her to do that. The first plan, Plan A, will actually save 1 of the 3 plants, so it saves 2,000 of the jobs. Plan B is a risky plan. It's got a 1/3 probability that all the plants will be saved and all 6,000 jobs are saved, but there's a balancing probability of 2/3 that everything is lost. No plants are saved, no jobs are saved. Which plan would you select? Well, again, as before, I've given this choice to groups that are split into 2, and half the group have seen this choice, and the majority select Plan A. But again, you could present it slightly differently. In this case, Plan C is exactly the same as Plan A, but rather than saying it will save 1 of the 3 plants, it's expressed as losing 2 of the 3 plants. So rather than saving 2,000 jobs, it's losing 4,000 jobs. Exactly the same scenario, but just using different words to explain it. And similarly, Plan D is the same as Plan B, and Plan D is expressed in terms of the number of jobs lost rather than the number of jobs saved. In this context, what do you think people would actually select? What would you select? Well, the majority of people this time actually select Plan D. So if we present the option to people as benefits, as savings, they're more likely to select Plan A. If we present it as losses, they're more likely to select Plan B. Why do they actually do that? It's all to do with attitude of risk, and a lot of research has been done to show that if we're actually talking about gains, about positive things, we tend to be risk averse. Kind of a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. If you've got something that's positive, then you're not going to risk losing it in order to get more. You're quite comfortable with what you've got. But the other way around, if you present something negatively and you're already in a loss situation, then you're more likely to take on more risk in order to try and get better. So you might say nothing ventured, nothing gained, but in a sort of negative sense. And that's a common way, a common effect that we see in how people respond to decisions framed in different ways. And indeed to a decision that spans the whole of that spectrum when they're at the positive end, gains end, people will behave in a risk-averse way. When they're down at the losses end, they behave in a risk-positive way. So they actually consciously take on risk, more uncertainty, in order to try and avoid some losses. And you could also describe that as sort of digging yourself into a bigger hole. You're already in a small hole, so if there's a chance you can get out of it, balanced by a chance of getting into a bigger hole, you'll take it, and you tend to end up often in the bigger hole. Sorry, there was one last example that I'd forgotten about. Again, this is a group of students, and this is a real example that I've taken from one of the videos that are on TED that Dan Ariely shows. And it's a real situation. He'd actually come across this advert for a well-known publication. I think he says what it is in the actual video, at the following annual subscription rates. Online access only was $59, print only was $125. The students that he talked to were required to take out a subscription to this, and when they asked what they would choose, the majority of them chose online. 68% chose online and 32% chose print. But the magazine then published a very strange special offer. They incorporated another option which added the print on top of the online on top of the print. So you've now got three options: just the online access, just the print, as we had before, or online plus print. And the decisions after the introduction of the new option are shown over there on the right. So after the introduction, 16%, only 16% compared to 68% previously, go for just the online access, and 84% are actually persuaded to move to online plus print. It's perhaps not surprising that a few people are persuaded to do that, but it's quite a massive shift when all of these people previously didn't think that they actually needed the print version. They were perfectly happy with the online access. And it's described by reference to this print-only option. You had the print-only option there for £125, and you're being given something better than that, in this case at no extra cost. So you're really comparing the new option to the print-only, which causes that shift, rather than weighing up the three options, or the two sensible options. In this case, there's no sense going for print only against each other. And one of the reasons he attributes that this effect to is that people don't really understand what their preferences are. They've not really sat down and thought about what matters to them, and so they're very easily influenced by different ways of presenting things. Here, presenting something that is a reference point that is very obviously worse than the thing that the publishers are hoping people will move to. He's got a very amusing example in his video about who you should take out on a date with you if you're actually trying to persuade someone to go out with yourself. I'll leave you to go and look at that. So just to summarise what we've looked at here, the examples that we've looked at have illustrated a number of cognitive illusions or biases. So a key question is, does knowing about these biases actually confer any immunity on you? Now that you know about these biases, and I've told you about some of the others that you can go out and find out about, are you actually going to be better decision makers? And you'd kind of hope that you would be, wouldn't you? But the answer, I think, has to be no. And Daniel Kahneman, he says, despite over 30 years of actually studying this, and he's probably the person that's more aware than anybody of all these potential biases, he still can't avoid them in his own practice when he's making decisions. Maybe you can be better than Daniel Kahneman, maybe not. But even if we can't avoid them completely, knowing about them does actually indicate things that we can actually try to do to guard against them, both as individuals, but also when we're operating in a professional context, trying to help managers make decisions in their businesses. We can design methods and processes that avoid these decision traps. And I'm going to go on and talk a little bit more about that in the second part of the video. Can I stop at that point and have a